Welcome everyone to another informative time on Amorgate Radio Communications. It's Geopolitical Musings for Global Leaders, and I'm your anchor, Abiodun Abari. It's our last edition for this quarter, and thank you so much for having been with us all the way. We are grateful and we are always ready to support organizations, ready to collaborate for impactful and transformational partnership. We encourage organizations to be as ambitious as possible. As our leverage, we always have behind it, okay? Spot on analysis and insight, actionable for your organizational pursuits locally and, of course, across border wise. Yes, it's the week of the 80th United Nations General Assembly in New York, and as usual, speech after speech, and of course, multilateralism at its peak. Yes, for Nigeria, it will be the nation's number 2 man, Vice President Kashim Shettima, standing in for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and he will be delivering his address today before the assembly. Okay, so talk about Mr. President's absence. Okay, of those talks, are they founded? All right, what will Nigeria be missing with Vice President Shettima representing Nigeria and President Tinubu not attending the UNGA? Okay, so what was the relevance of the United Nations? Okay, like Mr. Trump alluded to the war in Ukraine, the Congo, the Gaza. What role is the United Nations actually playing? Is the United Nations actually living up to its responsibilities in the scheme of things? Okay, as it concerns what we have in the geopolitical terrain. You want to evaluate the interests, or whose interests does the United Nations serve? Is it the interest of globalists or imperialists, all right, or developmental states? Do they also have their own interests being served in the scheme of things as it concerns the multilateralism of the United Nations? Okay, so we want to look at it. Is it actually useful multilateralism or usurpation of sovereignty? What does the United Nations represent? Okay, and has the United Nations outlived this usefulness or its relevance, or it's just time for inevitable reform? Yes, understandably, imperialism itself tends towards manifesting and maintaining that unevenness of the development of capitalism. Okay, you have development in the core of capitalism, development in the so to speak imperial states. All right, and what you have is underdevelopment in the developmental states in other climes. All right, so. And as a result, you have anti-imperialism as a response by developmental states, okay, in preventing, limiting, and counteracting imperialism. So how much of a platform has the United Nations been in enabling, okay, the balance of imperialism and anti-imperialism, okay, and ensuring that a coalition of interests, okay, is actually brought to the fore, all right, so that there's a balance of interest, a balance of power, all right, in of course, the geopolitical economy. So look at the United Nations, okay, as a platform, as an institution. Does it support the emergence of multipolarity? Okay, so because you look at the present day context and look at the struggle, all right, between the imperial forces and anti-imperial forces, so to speak, okay, and as also mirrored in a multilateral institution like the United Nations. All right, and you understand that the hegemonistic tendencies have the desire to maintain their hold and ensure that development is very, very well pronounced. All right. On their own turf, even if it's to the detriment of development every other place. Okay, and but when we can look at what is actually happening, the manifestation, we can safely argue that the developmental states have actually prevailed, okay, in that post-Cold War shift from a bipolar world to a unipolar world, has not really endured, all right, because of course, you have the post Second World War, so to speak, right? You had a bipolar world in the Soviet Union and of course the United States, right? And after the Cold War, and you had the dismantling of the Soviet Union, and the US hegemony was actually undeniable, but has it endured? No, that's not endured. Evidences that has not endured. All right, and the multipolarity of today's world cannot actually be denied. Okay, so basically, the United Nations as an institution should provide a level playing field for all geopolitical actors. All right, so there should not be putting the finger on the scale for any country or any power bloc. I believe that the United Nations needs to be reformed in this direction, because the evidence of a multipolar world, as in exemplified well, as we have in the BRICS, okay, the acceptance, the performance and the expansion of BRICS as a geopolitical bloc, okay, is one evidence. Even the dollarization of oil transactions too. All right, you have a lot of countries now, trading, okay, in their local currency, and also Nigeria to joining the fray. All right, and of course you look at the Russian-Ukraine conflict too. All right, as an evidence of some sort of geopolitical realism. Okay, I mean Russia, exerting its own influence as the big power, in Europe, the big power in that region, as the same way you have China, Southeast Asia, dominating the South China Sea, by being the dominant naval power, and you find that even the United States is trying to keep up with the level of production of naval infrastructure by the Chinese. So that's also an evidence of the multipolarity of the balance of power of the world that we are having. Okay, and we also have the development of communication satellites, proliferation, if we might say, especially among United States, China, and Russia. Okay, such that the elements of surprise is somewhat so much limited. And we also talk about the Arctic Circle. Russia being the sole superpower in the Arctic Circle. Okay, as at now, with their nuclear-powered icebreaker, they are the only country actually exploiting and exploring the region. Okay, the resources of the region. All right, and you're not surprised that Mr. Trump is so much interested in taking Greenland from Denmark. All right, in order to counteract Russia's influence in the region. So the evidences of the multipolarity of the world that we have is undeniable. All right, but the United Nations as an institution, okay, the way it's wired, the way it's structured, does it support, okay, the such a balance of power? All right, does it support that transition from a unipolar world to a multipolar world that we have? Or the United Nations needs to undergo necessary reforms to support the dynamics of the balance of power? And not taking anything away from the United States, of course, with their massive defense budgets and military bases, all right, around the world, myriads of intelligence assets and proxies. I believe that the occupier of the White House, the man behind the resolute desk in the White House in the United States, is the single biggest influencer of world peace. He has all the tools. He has all the toolbox, and he has all the tools in the toolbox, and he just has to make a decision. I mean, the cost-benefit analysis, because there's no decision that doesn't come with its own costs. All right, so it's just about weighing the benefits, whether they outweigh the cost, whether they are worthwhile. All right, and all costs. When you talk about costs, you talk about costs in holistic terms. Talk about physical cost, economic cost, opportunity cost. All costs on the table. All right, so the scenario we have now, right, we could argue that the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century undoubtedly catapulted the United Kingdom to being the single superpower then. All right, and you had, by late 19th century, you had the United States, Germany, and Japan, and others who had, successfully had diluted Britain's hold. Okay, and you had a multipolar order emerging at that time. All right, so this transition is not new. It also happened during the late 19th century when Britain, that's the United Kingdom, as a sole superpower, then had its dominance being challenged simultaneously by the United States, Germany, and Japan, and others who were having their own bite at the cherry. But evidently too, and actually presenting a split screen of the US hegemony and the United Kingdom's hegemony. Why the United Kingdom actually pursued the acquisition of empires, expansion. You have United States actually working to make the dollar the global currency. So actually you have the United States colonizing the world through its currency, rather than expansionist moves as done by the United Kingdom during its own hegemony. Yes, obviously as implemented by the petrodollar of the 1970s. Okay, so the arguments as to the non-realization of this ambition and the relative success of this ambition, okay, and so on. Okay, but generally, the concept of the geopolitical economy is actually an antithesis to globalization. Okay, and globalization as represented by institutions like the United Nations, all right, where nation states are not important, they are underplayed. All right, nation states are underplayed, and it's like a move towards the usurpation of the sovereignty. All right, and that's the extreme. All right, okay, and of course, this is to an hegemony where only one nation state matters. All right, so whether it's a situation where globalization is what is being adopted, right, where nation states as regards what they represent separately might not be prominent, but rather what actually will be common to all right, what to be adopted, okay, like common approach to climate change, common approach to health, all right, common approach to culture, all right, and so on and so forth, and things like marriage and so on and so forth, and things that countries should actually be individualistic about. People should be able to represent their identity, but when you have multilateral institutions run by globalists, they actually tend to suppress individual cultures and want something monocultural for the world. And so much talk about the speeches at the United Nations General Assembly, from Trump talking about the need for the United Nations to step up and intervene in wars in Ukraine, Congo, and Gaza, and to President Lula of Brazil, who actually talked about sovereignty, and in various reference to Trump, talking about the independence of the judiciary, judiciary finding former President Bolsonaro guilty of trying to orchestrate a coup. Okay, and he actually also hammered on multilateralism. Okay, and he also commented on Trump's fatally, the United States government fatally attacking suspected drug smugglers off the coast of Venezuela. Okay, they have a running battle. The United States government has a running battle with drug smugglers and actually killing them sort of extrajudicially. I mean, without trial is what is actually happening now, and I think the United States government is actually using that designation that Trans-Nicaragua is a terrorist organization, and using that to justify actually striking them lethally without trial. But let me say, what if they are not even smugglers? They're still suspected smugglers, and I believe that there should still be room to bring them to trial as regards just actually fatally attacking them. And there are so many what ifs. I mean, a lot of things could go wrong, and innocent people could actually be punished for it.
Harmogate, founded in 2008 out of a desire to build transgenerational structures for organizations, institutions, and nations. We have worked with large businesses, international development organizations, and public sector ministries and agencies. Harmogate, our uniqueness is that we do not just work for you, we work with you. For example, we do not leave you to the task after sourcing talent that will help the new hire settle into robust leadership development programs. We are technical experts in advising and supporting institutions on strategy and leadership, artificial intelligence, strategic human resource management, public sector reform, finance, audit and tax, FAT, and strategic communications. We do all this and more out of a desire to transform nations through institutions and organizations. For further inquiries, email contact@thearmogate.org or call +234 810 999 6666, +234 807 957 4151, and +161 0504 6026. www.thearmogate.org. Armogate, building to endure and transforming nations through institutions and organizations.
What if they have hostages on board? All right, it's possible. So, I mean, I believe that caution should be applied. I know, understand the drug problem, fentanyl, and all that. Synthetic drugs. The fatality they're causing in the United States, and the figures are alarming. I understand that, but at the same time, I believe that due process is there for a reason. Okay, the process has been well thought out and is there for a reason. It should be employed in dealing with these suspected drug smugglers. All right, and on to Palestinian issues now. The decision by traditional U.S. allies, United Kingdom, France, Canada, Australia, and Belgium, of course, the seat of the European Union, to actually recognize Palestine. Okay, and Trump has called it a reward for what Hamas did on October 7. Okay, October 7, at the day Hamas attacked Israel, killed over 1,200 and taking hostages. All right, over 215 hostages. And Prime Minister Netanyahu has vowed that there will be no Palestinian states. Okay, and even over the weekend, we still had over 50 Palestinians reportedly killed in Gaza. And you have over 65,000 killed already by bloody war. And Emmanuel Macron, France's leader, believe yes, it's time to change the approach. That the approach of total war has not worked. The approach of total war is not working. That you need to change the approach, and hence the recognition process is what is going to bring about the solution, the permanent solution to the challenges in Gaza. Okay, And right now we have 157 out of 193 nations now recognize Palestine as a sovereign nation. That is about 81% of United Nations member nations. Okay, and with latest at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly being France, Luxembourg, Malta, Monaco, Andorra, and Belgium. Okay, of course, joining Canada, Australia, Portugal, and United Kingdom, which made his own announcement on Sunday. Keir Starmer, United Kingdom's Prime Minister, believes it's necessary to keep the possibility of peace and a two-state solution alive, again, in the face of growing horror in the Middle East. Now, this recognition is an important step to keep that possibility of peace and a two-state solution alive. Okay, and Mr. Macron, the president of France, believes that to have peace and stability in the Middle East, the condition for a political solution, the political perspective, must be preserved, must be available, must be present. Okay, that option must be on the table. That path, okay, to create a political solution, right, must be on the table. That the military approach will not be successful, has not been successful, will not be successful. Yes, and he believes that the recognition will kickstart a political process for peace for everyone. All right, and he talked about phases. That the first phase that will follow the recognition will actually involve a ceasefire. All right, a release of all the hostages and the restoration of humanitarian intervention. That humanitarian workers will be allowed access so that people can be helped. All right, and the second phase, of course, will be involve organizing Gaza in terms of governance. All right, the reform of the governance structure of Gaza, and the third phase, of course, will be the physical infrastructure, construction of infrastructure and whatnot. So, recognizing Palestinian state provides the pathway to a political solution to the crisis, right, according to a position of Macron. So, but why is the release of hostages not being made a precondition for recognition? Okay, I mean, it's quite important. It's as if the hostages are not being put into consideration here, but Mr. Macron feels that putting that as a precondition might actually amount to playing to the hands of those who don't want peace in the region. Okay, so but actually it is being made a condition before the opening of an embassy to formalize diplomatic relations, and the release of the hostages is actually being integrated in the peace process. Okay, so the conditions and requirements will be integrated in the peace process. So believing that this recognition will kickstart the political solution and a peace process. Okay, but Marco Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of State, believes that the decision is reckless, and this disincentivizes Hamas from towing the line of diplomacy. Okay, that to embolden Hamas and just abandon diplomacy and might not decide not to release the hostages. Okay, but on the contrary, Macron believes that the objective of Hamas is endless chaos. Okay, so making Palestinians believe that peace and stability cannot come to the region, and that a Palestinian state is impossible. Okay, so Hamas thrives in this chaos. All right, and the objective of Hamas is to destroy Israel and its people. So to end this war, actually, there's the need to isolate Hamas. All right, and recognition. Okay, and the peace process, the accompanying peace process will help isolate Hamas. All right, so Hamas is obsessed with destroying Israel. All right, so and of course, every nation, just like France, recognizes the right of peace-loving Palestinians who want a state, and they should not be pushed towards Hamas. Okay, that the peace-loving Palestinians, if they are not given their own state, that they will move towards Hamas, and they will see Hamas as the only option. That not giving them the opportunity to have a state will make them see Hamas as the unique option. So this recognition, right, will remove that from the table, will not make Hamas the only option. All right, so and this recognition also enabled the New York declaration, just to evidence of its working already, evidence of its effectiveness already. The declaration of 147 countries, including Arab states, on the need to dismantle and disarm Hamas. All right, so already Hamas is being isolated, and creating a coalition of a concrete action. I mean, giving like statehood to Palestinians, isolating Hamas from the rest of the Palestinians, and of course the whole region. So I mean that coalition, aiding the coalition, the coalescing behind those actions, those concrete actions, is worth that recognition is actually enabling. Of course, to Israel's credit, a lot of the top echelon of Hamas and Hezbollah have been actually neutralized. Okay, but there's a failure in the rank and file, because at the beginning of the war, I mean, as at October 7th, you had about 25,000 strong force, 25,000 men. I mean, fighting force for Hamas at the beginning, and that is still about the same figure despite the killings. So that means Hamas has been effective in recruitment. So, and it's because of the ideology. All right. So to actually eliminate Hamas, the total war, the military action has actually been counterproductive, because Hamas, yes, the head, the strategic heads, the top echelon, they have been decimated, and so on. But the rank and file, the fighting force, they are there, and as they are being killed, they are recruiting more, because the ideology of Hamas is something that is still thriving. So you also see that this total war approach is also leading to the isolation of Israel, because of the level of collateral damage in terms of killing of women, civilians, journalists, and humanitarian aid workers. All right, and there have even been allegations of genocide, and you have even Netanyahu here an order by the ICC, and arrest warrant issued. Warrant issued for his arrest by the International Criminal Court. All right, so that is also leading to the isolation of Israel. So it's being counterproductive, and you also look at the level of support for Hamas. As at October 7, the level of support for Hamas was very low in the region, according to polls taken. But right now, the level for Hamas is high. I mean, Israel's approach has increased sympathy for Hamas in the region. So literally, killing an idea might be impossible, but providing an alternative to that idea is something that might be effective. So there's a need to bring every ally together to dismantle Hamas, to disarm Hamas, and recognizing the Palestine state through the Palestinian state through the Diplomatic channel will facilitate this, and then Hamas can be isolated and then dismantled. Because outright killing of Hamas in the last 2 years has not brought the solution nearer, right? So I talked about the collateral damage, civilians, children, journalists, aid workers, and Israel's reputation is being destroyed, credibility is being destroyed, and I also talked about the ICC's warrant of arrest for Netanyahu. All right, so but Netanyahu himself believes that allowing a Palestinian state will provide a bedrock for terrorism, and Israel's threat, the threat to Israel will be existential. Okay, there's no question about the traumatic and unacceptable nature of the October 7 horror. And the release of the hostages, very, very important in this conversation. When you just look at the absurdity, when you consider the depravity of their experience, very condemnable, all right? But the solution lies in the peace process, that can be kick-started with the recognition of a Palestinian state. All right, so of course, a demilitarized Palestinian state, with Hamas isolated, dismantled, disarmed, might not pose an existential threat to Israel. Okay, and when you have a Palestinian state that is under modern governance reform to enable probity, transparency, accountability, and support the civil statehood of the Palestinian people, so they'll be able to pursue their economic aspirations, rebuild their country, and live in peace and harmony in the region. All right, so these reforms should actually be a part of the process. Okay, so and But when you see that the Palestinians were already working with the Israeli government in the West Bank, all right, but Hamas came to power through elections, through the ballot box, all right. So what is the possibility that it will not happen again? So in order to avert that, the rival of Hamas, the Palestinian Authority, needs to be backed. Okay, needs to be backed to be able to attain political power the day after. Very, very quite important, because there cannot be a vacuum. All right. So, and of course, the reforms of the Palestinian Authority, very, very important. All right, and supported to get political power. All right, and relevance. And you understand that because of the recognition process, okay, the Palestinian Authority has subjected itself to reforms, like a new elected vice president, and monitoring are being done by the United States audit structure, all right, and for the first time also denounced the October 7 incidents, all right. So the recognition actually was a way to re-engage and bring the Palestinian Authority, the rival of Hamas for political power, back to the table. And Hamas's isolation and dismantling should be holistic, not just militarily but politically, okay, and that is actually by re-engaging the Palestinian Authority, Hamas's rival, and when you see that there's no Hamas in the West Bank and Israel is destroying the West Bank, okay, is there justification for that? Would that be justified, or would that hamper the peace process? All right. So, but the United States administration also believes that the recognition of within Hamas and hampers diplomacy. Okay, but for France, it's actually the focus on the day after. The day after, talking about the three phases. Okay, the three phases. First phase, that's a ceasefire, release of all hostages, and the restoration of humanitarian intervention. Second phase, talking about governance reform, and the third phase, fiscal reconstruction. And I'm talking about governance. You have a de facto government, some sort of transitional government, which will of course include the Palestinian Authority, but excluding Hamas. All right. So vetting process by Israel, Jordan, Egypt, and other neighbors. Right? Security arrangements to scale up training and equipment of Palestinian law enforcement and security forces. Okay, that's already happening, but of course will be scaled up to be able to meet up requirements. And of course, a UN-backed international force deployment in Gaza. So that will serve as a deterrent to Hamas. All right. So that will ensure that Hamas will never be involved in governance. So, and there will be de-radicalization and this armament of Hamas members. Okay. So, of course, France is aligned with the United States on these objectives, but it's just a path to get there, because France believes that the only way to get the buy-in of all stakeholders to ensure the success of this plan is by the recognition process. Okay, and Israel's current approach has actually led to displacement of thousands of people, and actually the day after will not be possible in Gaza if people are already there displaced, right? So, and the allegations of genocide and ethnic cleansing, and so on. So, and so the objective to displace people actually is not appropriate, and I think that this recognition path to be actually, if followed and implemented, if you can get the buy-in of the United States, we actually bring the path to lasting peace, where Hamas will be isolated, disarmed, dismantled and excluded from governance in the region, and the Palestinian people can lay a claim as to citizenship, and live a productive life devoid of chaos. And on this note, we've come to the end of this edition and this quarter. Thank you so much for being with us from the beginning of this quarter right of this time, and until I come up on your devices again next quarter, please keep learning and keep impacting from now. Yes, bye bye and God bless.